Everyone, I deeply apologize for being late to my webinar. I was totally confused about link. I was using a different link and it was the wrong link. So I apologize for that. But I got it figured out. Called my assistant. I was like, how come no one's in my meeting? I thought we had all these registrations. Got it figured out, and here we are. So again, I apologize for being late. But I promise I will end on time, maybe even end a little early. So I am going to just go ahead and dive right in. And if other people are later than me, then I will just let them in as they come. And I will give, by the way, if you have any questions about anything that I'm sharing as I go along, please feel free to post in the chat. And I'll do my best to answer as I go. But I'm also going to open up for some questions at the end. So today I'm going to be talking about, I feel that you have to invest in real estate as part of your investing strategy, primarily because it's going to give you by far the best returns and the best benefits for building wealth and building your portfolio. And if you know me, a lot of you here do know me. I'm very much a kind of a numbers and analytical guy. So I'm going to be like diving into like some math. Might get a little bit geeky and you might find it a little overwhelming. But my hope today is to just kind of inspire you to say, you know what, I haven't invested in real estate yet, but I really need to find a way to get started. It's definitely not some sort of a get rich quick seminar or anything like that. So I don't want to imply that real estate is some sort of easy or become an overnight sensation type of a strategy. But it is, again, in my opinion, I'm going to show you the math here in a minute, by far the best investment vehicle available. Let's see. Kelsey's asking me to share the link so that everyone can get in. I don't know where should I be sharing it? We still have a few more people joining. I'm not sure where she wants me to share it, but it looks like most people, we're good. All right, so let's dive in. Oh, just real quick, a little bit about me. I'm the father of 8 kids. In the picture, just my wife and seven kids, but we added an additional one, sort of. My wife's 13-year-old brother, we kind of took over guardianship for him and he lives with us now. So one kid not pictured, we'll be updating our family photo soon. So that's coming. But I've been in real estate for about 14 years and about 13 of those have been spent as a real estate investor. Currently I own 14 doors. And after all my expenses, those bring me in about $6,000 a month in cash flow, after maintenance, after everything, management fees, all of that stuff. But more importantly, and we'll be getting into this, have brought me well over $1 million in equity gains. And within 2 years, we basically went from being in debt to owning 12 of our doors in a really short period of time, because we were super focused on it. We kind of like caught the bug and we were just like, we just need to start buying more investment properties, and found some, like, it's interesting what you focus on expands, and we just became obsessed with it, and suddenly opportunities started coming to us. And we also had some luck. Honestly, we had some really good opportunities with some stock that we got from our company, and kind of came into some cash that allowed us to expand our portfolio quickly. But I really do think, like, when you become obsessed, like when you become totally obsessed with doing something, you'll find a way. And if you're not obsessed, you'll find an excuse. So, all right. So I'm going to do a couple of math exercises here. So, and I'm hoping that we can make this interaction. So hopefully some of you can participate in the chat. A couple of people in my team who are in this meeting have already seen some of these numbers. So if you've already seen it, you're not allowed to answer. But if you haven't seen it, you're allowed to answer. So everyone's going to have their own number for how much they need to retire. I'm not here to, try to tell you your number, but let's just do a mathematical exercise here. Let's pretend that you have 20 years before you want to retire. And let's also pretend that your goal is to get to $1 million. It depends on where you live, right? $1 million is probably low by my standards, but you know, and I know we've got some Southern California people in the house. They're probably like, I can't even buy a roll of toilet paper for $1 million, right? But if you're in, you know, other parts of the country or the world, it might be enough. But again, this is just a mathematical exercise. It's not me telling you that you need $1 million to retire. So, but if you decided that $1 million was your goal and you were starting with zero, how much would you need to save in order to get there? So the first one is, okay, you've got 20 years. You've got 20 years to get to $1 million, and you're not going to invest it. You're just going to stuff it all under your mattress. How much money do you think you would need to save? Go ahead and post in the chat per month. How much money would you need to stuff under your mattress every month to get to $1 million in 20 years? Don't be like busting out a calculator. Like, just make this fun. Just go with your gut. Just like let's just see some guesses. Sarah Lucas guessed $1,000. Yannicka guessed $2,000. Russell Morgan with the guess at $5,000. Hint, so far he's the closest. No, we're not factoring in inflation. Purely just literally, you're going to stuff money under your mattress until you hit $1 million. You know, assuming you've stuck the same amount in every single month, no return whatsoever. All right, I'll go ahead and share the answer. I'm hoping to see some more guesses on the next one. So the correct amount is $4,166 per month. And I think we can all agree that the $1 million is probably low, but also $4,166 would be a really hard amount of money for most of us to save every single month. Right? I mean, you know, it's possible, you know, there's people who can do it, but for the majority of, you know, Americans, I'm assuming you're making an average of whatever. I don't even know what the average income in the US is these days, probably $70,000 or something like that. Oh, dang it. We clicked on admitting someone into the meeting and it gave away the next answer. But if you put it in a standard yield savings account, now I know that there's some cool like online high yield savings accounts and things like that, but I just Googled like what's the standard yield on a typical savings account right now. It's 0.39%. So if you were going to put it in a standard yield savings account, you would need to put 0.39% per month. What if you were putting it all into, like, let's say a 401k or mutual funds of some kind that are yielding you a 7% return? So significantly higher return than we've seen so far. At a 7% return, if you were investing your money and it was growing at an average rate of 7% per year, you're starting at zero, you have 20 years to get to $1 million. How much do you think you would need to put in per month? Man, Russell, he knows his stuff. Russell guessed at $2,000 a month. Anyone else want to take a stab? Come on, we've got, let's see here. It's not letting me see how many participants we have in the meeting right now because of the way I'm sharing my screen. We need a couple more guesses though. All right, there we go. We got some 2,500, we got some 3,000. All right, the correct answer is $1,959 per month. Christy says, that's why I have you, so I don't have to do math like that. All right, now what if, you know, the stock market, well, when I say the market, what I'm referring to is the S&P 500. Everyone kind of knows the S&P 500 goes up at an average rate of 10% per year. So if you put all your money into the S&P 500, it grows at 10% per year, then how much would you need per month? I won't make anyone guess because I can tell you guys all hate the guessing. It comes out to $1,381%. I'm sorry, $1,381 a month. What I'm noticing about these numbers, by the way, so far, is that the return only went up from 7% to 10%. So that's only what a 30%, right? But the amount that you need to invest dropped by more than 30%. So the return that you get on your money is dramatically important. You know, when you consider compound interest, you know, if you graph compound interest, it's a parabolic, right? It's exponential. Right. So the better return you get, it's going to go down by more than. So what if you were a really great investor and you could beat the market, which even Warren Buffett doesn't beat the market. So just let go of that notion right now, but just pretend that you're a prodigy. You figured out how to beat the market, and you got 12% per year. Then you would need $1,087 per month. Okay, still, like, that's a little more doable for most of us. But I would also argue that, again, for maybe the average American, that a fairly difficult amount of money to be able to save and invest every month. But what if I could show you, and I'm going to show you my math on this. What if I could show you how to get 20% through real estate? I'm actually going to show you how to get more than 20% through real estate, but I'm going to just assume that my numbers are wrong, and I'm going to assume that I've been overly aggressive in my numbers. But what if you could somehow miraculously get 20%? How much do you think you would need to invest every single month in order to have $1 million in 20 years at 20%? Sarah, I guess $700. Yannicka says $500 to $600. All right, the correct answer is only $411 per month. To me, that's a pretty doable number for most people. But I'm sure, and I hope you're all sitting there like extremely skeptical. I hope you're all like, okay, who is this guy? Like, how are you really going to get 20%? If it was possible to get 20% on your money, everyone would do it, right? So, but I'll break down the math and kind of show you, but I can speak for my personal properties, again, going back to the 14 doors that we own. Now, yes, the market's been a little hot, so maybe the last couple of years are not a fair indicator of what the future is going to be. But Christy and I have been averaging somewhere in the ballpark of a 40% annualized return. It depends on the property. That's why I say somewhere in the ballpark. Not all properties have performed as well as others, but around a 40% return annualized on our money on the properties that we've invested in so far. So I feel like 20% is doable, and I'm going to show you why. All right, so this is a list that was put together by Gary Keller. If you don't know who Gary Keller is, he is kind of an icon in the real estate industry. He's the co-founder and I think the CEO or president of Keller Williams Real Estate, and super smart guy, mega investor, extremely well respected in the real estate world. And he wrote a book called The Millionaire Real Estate Investor. Many agents who are in the meeting today have heard of The Millionaire Real Estate Agent. But he also has another book called The Millionaire Real Estate Investor. And he came out with a list that I just love so much. And it is all about what real estate is. What are all the, what are the cool benefits of real estate? And so number one, real estate is accessible, meaning that anybody can buy it. We're not in feudal England or anything like that, where you're in a situation where you're not, you're not part of the right class, so you're not allowed to buy properties. If you've got enough money and enough credit or whatever it is that you would need, you could buy properties. It's available to everybody. All right. Next, it's appreciable, meaning in almost all cases, it goes up in value over time. Really extremely few exceptions to that rule, but the only thing I could think of is, like, I don't know, maybe you bought real estate in a area like a small mining town as an example, and then the mine shut down and then the value of the property plummets. But like when you're buying in bigger areas, big populations where there's lots of different industries, like, I mean, I take our area, we live here in the Southeast Valley of Phoenix, and the largest employer in this area is Intel. By far, right? They could close down their factory, and yeah, it might hurt our real estate market for a minute, but in the long term, it's really not going to have a catastrophic impact. There's too many other employers, and then the reality is that over time, real estate is still going to go up in value. But this is probably my favorite, is that it is leverageable, meaning that you can borrow against it. Not only can you borrow against it, you can borrow pretty heavily against it. As an investor, you can usually borrow 80% of the value of the property. If you're buying a primary residence, you typically borrow as much as 97% of the value of the property with using other people's money. So you can control and own real estate and take advantage of the gains. You get 100% of the gains without using only 3% of your own money. Like, imagine if you could buy, I can't think of hardly anything else in the world that you can buy with using only 3% of your own money, but you still get to take advantage of 100% of the gains. So that's part of what makes real estate super valuable. And we'll go into that more in a minute as well. It's rentable, so of course you can get other people to pay you every single month to live there, and hopefully you can generate some cash flow from that. It's improvable. You can take real estate and improve the value by adding to it, building onto it. You know, let's say you had a house that was, I was looking at a property the other day that was a 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom. And I was like, I wonder what would happen to the value of this property if we added an additional bathroom, right? Would the cost of adding the bathroom justify the increase in the value? I never found the answer, by the way, but anyway, that's the idea. You can improve it and it will add to the value of the property. Sometimes it doesn't add by as much as it costs to do, but it still adds to the value. It is deductible, depreciable, and deferrable. And if you're hearing those words and have no idea what they mean, don't worry, I have a whole slide later that's going to talk about each of those benefits. But you know how people always talk about, you know, how the wealthy, you know, the extremely wealthy pay very little to no money in taxes because they have all these secret, you know, millionaire tax breaks. The secret millionaire tax breaks is real estate, depreciable, deferrable, and deductible. And we'll be talking about what each of those means here in a minute. And then lastly, it is very stable. Typically, real estate values are not super volatile, especially when compared to values in the stock market. All right. So, oh, and I'm sorry, forgot one. Livable. People have to live somewhere. Like, that's one of the things that's really cool about it. You know, I have a quote later in my presentation from Oprah Winfrey that says, hey, I've always believed in real estate because you can't live in a stock certificate, right? No matter what happens in the world, people are still going to have to live somewhere, and they're going to have a cost associated with living. It's a necessity. Shelter is an absolute necessity, not just something that people might want as a luxury. All right, so enough. Oh, and then one more thing. Now, this article was from early 2022, so I understand that it's not exactly what's happening in the market right now, but the principle is the same, so I decided to still share this. In 2021, in the Phoenix market, and now I know that the numbers were even more dramatic in some areas, like in California, you know, but again, in the Phoenix market, average home prices rose 22% in the year 2021. So we started the year with a median home value of $450,000, ended with $549,000, which means that if you owned a home, you gained $99,000 in equity, or essentially your net worth went up by $99,000 that year, which was more than what the average person made in their income. So people actually made more money in equity gains in their house than they made from their jobs, which that alone is pretty powerful. But here's the problem. If all you own is your own home, which, by the way, if you don't own your own home, obviously that's the first step, and we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. But if you own your own home, it unfortunately doesn't do you a ton of good that the value of the property is $99,000. You want to know why? Because you still have to live somewhere. And if you were to replace that property with another property, even a fairly similar property, it's going to cost you. You're not going to be able to sell your $550,000 house and go back in time and buy a $450,000 house, right? You would sell it and then you would go buy another $550,000 house. So you're not really getting ahead. So gaining equity in your primary residence is fun. It's cool to look at, but unless you plan on selling your house and someday moving to, I don't know, where's somewhere really, Guam or something. I don't even know if Guam is cheap, but you're moving somewhere like really, really cheap. Gaining value in your primary residence doesn't really help you live a better lifestyle. But imagine if you owned 4 or 5 rental properties, right? And those rental properties are potentially increasing in value, but they're also they're giving you cash flow, but then they also all went up by an average of $99,000 per year. Now look at how much wealth you've built for yourself in only 1 year, right? So, all right, now we're going to get back into some math. I know you guys are all super, super excited. All right, so, and this is going to require more guessing. And I want to share before I get into these numbers that I understand that this is, I want you all to understand that this is just a mathematical exercise. This is not reality, but I am going to show you a spreadsheet that I built that's going to show you exactly how I came to these numbers in a minute, because I think I'm about to blow your minds. In fact, I really hope I'm going to blow your minds. Okay, so let's just say that you had $60,000 today and you put every penny of it into the S&P 500, you gain 10% per year. How much would you have in 30 years? Now, again, we're for the sake of this exercise, we're pretending that it's a straight line. We know that it's not a straight line. There's going to be years when it's up. There's going to be years when it's down. But we're assuming that it's going to continue to average. You know, the S&P has averaged 10% a year for the last almost 100 years or whatever, since it first started in 1947 or whatever, right? 10% per year. So let's just assume that continues. You put $60,000 in today and you just let it sit there for 30 years. You never touch it. You never take any dividends. You never cash any of it out. You don't even look at the balance. 30 years from now, you open it up. How much do you think you would have? Everyone's afraid to guess now. I know Russell's got this answer because he nailed it earlier. All right, Kevin Andres guessed 7 million. I think he said $7 million. Yep, 7 million. I'm not sure if he meant to say 7 million or 700,000. It's less than 7 million and it's more than 700,000. Anyone else want to take a guess? Okay, Sarah said 1,025. I assume you meant to say 1,025,000. I don't know. Okay. 1 million. Okay, yeah. So Sarah guessed about 1 million. Rochelle Svelling guessed 2.5 million. All right. Well, the correct answer is $1,151,000. Hopefully that alone right there, like if you didn't get anything else from this whole meeting today, you're like, oh wow, like that's pretty good, right? If I can find a way to invest 60,000, I know you don't all have 60,000 to just like invest today, but like that's not a huge amount. Like you could save $1 million over the course of, you know, whether you're doing a 401k or whether you're doing an IRA or whatever, you could find a way to invest $60,000 over a period of time. And if you could find a way to let that sit there for 30 years without touching it, it would grow into $1.1 million. Like that's pretty exciting. Okay. And that's with a 10% annual return. Like seeing compound interest at work, it just blows my mind. It's just so exciting. All right. But what if instead of putting the $60,000 into the S&P 500, you took your $60,000 and you used it as a 20% down payment on a $300,000 house? So you found a $300,000 house. I know my California agents are like, those don't exist. They do exist in Arizona and in other places. Okay. So, but you find a house that's 300,000, you put $60,000 down on it. You finance 240,000. How much would you have in 30 years? Now we're just going to assume here that you just bought one house and you just kept that house for 30 years. You made the little payments, but what I am looking at is the value of the property went up, but I'm also accumulating your cash flow, right? So I'm not reinvesting your cash flow in this scenario. I'm just purely saying, you know, every month you've got $100 in cash flow, but then next year the rent went up a little bit and you got $200 a month in cash flow. And I just added up all the cash flow over the 30 years, plus the house has now been paid off completely. Plus it's worth a lot more than $300,000 in 30 years. Again, I'm going to show you how I came to these numbers, but does anyone want to take a stab at how much you would have in 30 years buying one house, $60,000 down, $300,000 house? Everyone's just tired of guessing. I guess I have to just move on. No one wants to guess anymore. All right, Sarah guessed 1.75. Okay, I really want one more guess. One more guess. Someone give me one more guess. Come on, people. All right, Yannicka. Thank you, Yannicka. 2.2. Rochelle, 10 million. All right. It actually comes out to $1,864,000. So a little bit better. I mean, quite a bit better, actually, almost twice as good as the S&P 500 did. But here's the problem with that model. Okay. It doesn't really make a ton of sense to just buy one house and sit on it for 30 years. There's a couple of reasons why that doesn't make sense from a tax standpoint, but also remember I mentioned about leverageable, that what gives real estate power is that you can leverage it to get loans against it, still have positive cash flow, and use that money to buy additional properties in the future. So I came up with a new scenario and I said, what if every time you hit 50% equity, so you buy one house, so you put $60,000 down on the first house, and you waited until that house was worth what you owed on it versus what it was worth is twice, you know, like it's worth 600,000. That's not the exact numbers. It's worth 500,000 and you only owe 250 as an example. You're now at 50% equity. What if you took that and you sold it and you took your money and you used it to go buy 2 houses. Now, by the way, it takes 8 years on average. Okay, so between the amount that you're going to pay down on the loan and the value of the property going up, assuming you put 20% down on it. So you put 20% down, it's going to take you 8 years to gain that other 30% equity in the valuation of the property increasing and in your loan balance being paid down in 8 years on average. It's not exactly 8 years, it's like 7.8 years or whatever. But okay, we're just going to assume every 8 years. So you bought one house with your $60,000. 8 years later, you sold that house and you used it to go buy 2 properties. Okay, and then 8 years after that, so 16 years after the initial purchase, you sold those 2 properties and you went and bought 4 properties. Then 8 years later, you sold those 4 properties and you bought 8 properties. And then that would be 24 years. So you have 6 more years until you hit 30 years. So at 30 years, you've owned 8 properties for 6 years. Now, again, this is just a mathematical exercise. I understand that it's not always practical to you're not always going to gain exactly 50% equity every 8 years. It's not always going to be practical. I have more than 50% equity in a lot of my properties, but I'm choosing not to sell them and exchange them for 2 properties right now because of where interest rates are. So like, I get it. This is just a mathematical exercise to help you understand what's possible. But if you were to do that, on a straight line, you would end up with, after 30 years, $4,800,000. I want to make sure you understand the only money of your own that you ever invested into that was $60,000. Everything else was just capitalizing on the cash flow and the valuation of the property going up over time. Okay, but here's the problem with this model is that all I have you doing is taking your cash flow and just pretending like you're just holding it, right? That's not super realistic. If you produced cash flow on the property, you would possibly reinvest that cash flow, but that got way too complicated because the cash flow changes every year and I couldn't figure out how to calculate that. So I came up, oh, and by the way, that's a 45.7% annualized return on your money. Okay, so again, you took your $60,000, turned it into $4.8 million over the course of 30 years, turned it into $4.8 million. All right, but if you took all your cash flow, instead of just holding it, what if you took it and you used it to pay your loan balances off faster? So every time you produced $200 in cash flow, you made an extra $200 payment on the mortgage. Now, with that scenario, you could actually probably buy new properties every 7 years instead of every 8 years. But I decided that was too complicated. I'm just still going to keep it at every 8 years. But the difference is that you're paying your mortgages down a little bit faster. So by the end of the 30 years, you end up with $5,867,124, which is a 46.7% annualized return on your initial $60,000 investment. Okay. Did I just blow anyone's mind, or are you just sitting there thinking, there's no freaking way that's not possible? I really want someone to say there's no freaking way that's not possible. All right. Well, let me show you the sources of where I found this data. So first of all, Fred produces this graph. The Fred Economic Data Research Company produces a data about how much the median price in the United States has risen since 1963. Okay, so in quarter 1, 1963, median home price in the United States was $17,800. Today, it's $436,800. So I did the math on that. It comes out to about 5.5% per year. So on average, homes are going up by about 5.5% per year. Rents go up by an average of 8.86% per year in the United States. Oops. Ever since 1980. So since 1980, rents have been going up. Rents have been going up by about 8.86% per year. So I built a spreadsheet that's only assuming 5% valuation increases and 5% rent increases. Okay, so I tried to be conservative. That's what I'm saying. Like, I didn't even use the maximum numbers, okay? And I literally built it out, okay? So year one, you bought a $300,000 house. You put $60,000 down, you financed $240,000. I don't know what the fair market rent in all markets for a $300,000 home, but in my market, it's going to be around $1,900 a month. So $21,600 per year. Your mortgage $20,603. I used, I believe, a 6.5% rate on that because when I built this was a few weeks ago when rates were looking like they were going to come down, probably a little low right now, but rates fluctuate too much for me to update the spreadsheet every 5 minutes. Okay. Expenses, I used 18%. So I'm using 5% for maintenance, 5% for vacancy, and 8% for management. That can vary dramatically. Okay, there's no way of knowing for sure exactly how much your expenses on a property are going to be, but I'm using 18%. So as you can see in year one, I actually have you losing $3,000, meaning you can't rent the home out for how much your expenses are. You're going to lose $3,000 on that home the first year. But the good news is the value of the property went up 5%. So year two, it's now worth $315,000. Oh, and guess what? The rents went up 5% as well. So now you're only losing $2,100 in cash flow on year two, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You just continue that all the way down for 30 years. You end up with a house that's worth $1.3 million. It's completely paid off, and you've brought in tens of thousands of dollars in cash flow over the 30-year period. Okay. But then this is my other spreadsheet. It's structured the exact same way. But again, we bought a house in year one. By year 8, that house is worth $422,000, assuming it went up at 5% per year. And I now owe $6,000 on it, right? So I can now take that house, I sell it. I've got you losing 7% of the equity in realtor fees and title, escrow, whatever. That might be low, it might be high. We've got a lot of realtors here today, so that's actually a little high if you're a realtor because you'll be selling a home on your, yourself. But whatever it is, it might be slightly higher, slightly lower. But let's just assume you sold your $422,000 property, you paid 7% in fees, you're left with $185,000 in net. You took the $185,000 in net and you bought two $422,000 houses. Notice I didn't go back and buy two $300,000 houses. That's not going to be practical. But you sold that and you bought two $422,000 properties, put $185,000 down, mortgage $659,000, et cetera, et cetera. Took that all the way out 30 years. Your 8 properties are now worth $9.9 million. You owe $5.3 million on them. Okay, so hopefully you guys, I'm not going to go line by line, but if you would like to check my math, let me know and I'll share my spreadsheets with you. Hopefully, I hope you guys are all just like, yeah, that looks good to me. All right. Now I want to get into, I promised I was going to share with you a little bit more specifics about the tax benefits of real estate, because this is, you know what, that I didn't even factor the tax benefits into these numbers. Okay, the amount of money you're going to save on taxes by owning 8 properties is going to be humongous, and I did not factor that into these numbers. I just purely looked at cash flow and equity gains. But there's humongous tax benefits to owning real estate as well. So number one, you can deduct a lot of the expenses. You're probably familiar with tax deductions, right? Especially if you're self-employed or whatever, you have certain things that you deduct on your taxes every year. Your property taxes are, I'm not an accountant, by the way, so speak with an accountant, but your property taxes are usually deductible. Your insurance is possibly deductible. This is the huge one. The interest that you paid on your mortgage is deductible. Okay, meaning that you can write that off as an expense associated with the property. That's one of the things that makes, so not only, yes, you're paying some interest, but then you get to deduct all of it off of your taxes. Your property management fees, your maintenance fees, your advertising, office space, equipment, travel, legal and accounting fees, all of those things you can deduct in association with owning a property. So even if you have a property and you generated, you brought in $21,000 a year in rent, well, by the time you deduct all of those expenses, you probably are not actually paying any taxes on that money. And I'm going to get into depreciation in a second. Don't worry. For now, I'm just talking about deductible. All right. Then it is depreciable. And this is the secret. This is the secret. It's not a secret. It's legal and it's fully allowed for anyone to do. But it's when you hear about like the rich when their tax loopholes, this is the huge secret for real estate investing. That you can depreciate the value of the property over the course. A residential property, commercial depreciates a little bit differently, but residential properties can depreciate over the course of 27.5 years. Now, you can't depreciate the land. The land doesn't go down in value. It doesn't wear down. It doesn't wear out. But a structure, you put a house, the structure itself wears out. So the IRS lets you say, hey, we're going to let you take kind of a standard depreciation on the structure of that property for 27 and a half years. So if you bought a $300,000 property, let's just assume the land was worth $30,000, the structure is worth $270,000. Then just by taking the standard depreciation, you get to tell the IRS, you get to tell the IRS that you lost $9,817 in income on the property. So even if you generated, even after all of your deductions, you still had $10,000 in cash flow left over on the property. Now you get to say, oh yeah, but don't forget depreciation. So now I can depreciate the value of the property by an additional $9,817 and basically show to the IRS that the property made no money. In most cases, you can show to the IRS that the property actually lost money. Now, I'm going to go ahead and say, since I have a lot of realtors here in the room, that if you're a realtor, you're earning commission income, you can actually use the depreciation to offset your regular income. Okay, so let's say that you earned $100,000 in commissions. And maybe after your deductions, you are already at basically zero on the property, or maybe you made $200 or $1,000, but then you took the depreciation of $9,817. You can now use that extra, however much is left over after wiping out all the income on the property, to offset your taxable income on your normal commissions. Like, okay, so I'm not seeing, like, the faces that I'm seeing who people have their cameras on are not looking wowed enough. Okay, so just pretend that you just saved yourself. If you're in California and you're paying, I don't know, whatever, 30% in taxes, and I just found you a $10,000 deduction, you just saved yourself $3,000. But but wait, there's more. You can also do what's called a cost segregation study. A cost segregation study is where you get an engineer, like a civil engineer, to come out to the property. Now, there's a couple $1,000s to pay for this, but they will come out and they will say, well, yeah, we understand that the IRS lets you depreciate this over 27 and a half years, but what if, but like the dishwasher doesn't last 27 and a half years, the air conditioner doesn't last that long, the wiring doesn't last that long, and they'll basically create an itemized schedule for you. So I was able to do 2 cost segregation studies on 2 of my properties last year that gave me around $60,000 in accelerated depreciation that I was able to use to wipe out a huge amount of my tax liability. You use that to wipe out a bunch of your tax liability, and then you use that money that you would have otherwise given to the government to go buy another property. Okay, so that's kind of the hack of how you can grow. Now, I do want to let everyone know there is a huge downside to depreciation, and that is that it will increase the amount of capital gains you have to pay on the property. Yes, I saw Karen's question. I just want to finish this thought. So it will increase the amount of capital gains tax that you have to pay on the property. In other words, if you're going to take depreciation on it, the IRS is going to increase your capital gains tax that you have to pay on it by that same amount. So if your plan is to buy the property and sell it 5 years from now, you might not want to take depreciation because you might end up having to pay more in capital gains tax. If you don't know what capital gains tax is, anytime you have an investment and you sell it, you're going to pay a tax on your gain. When it's your primary residence, you usually don't have to pay capital gains tax. Well, at least in Arizona. I know a lot of times in California, it's a lot more common. And I'm going to talk about 1031 exchanges in a minute as well. But yeah, when you take depreciation and your plan is to not let's just say you're 80, you've owned all these properties and you're like, you know what, I've depreciated these properties and I just want to cash out and enjoy my money. If you sell those properties, you are going to get absolutely hammered on capital gains tax. Now, there's a couple of ways around that though. A couple more loopholes for the rich. But before I get into the loopholes for the rich, let me go back. Karen asked a question. What is the what is the investment? What if the investment home was built in 1950? Would you still be able to depreciate it for 27 and a half years? Yeah, that's the cool part. See, the IRS is acting like the property is going to completely wear out and need to be rebuilt in 27 and a half years. How many homes do you know that are way over 27 and a half years? I know Sarah here in our meeting today, she's in New Hampshire. Don't you sometimes sell homes that were built in like the early 1900s or like late 1800s even?
The latest one that I saw was 1835, but yeah.
35. Okay. So it's actually based on when you bought it, not how old the property is. Insane, right? So you can buy a property that was built in 1940 and still depreciate it for 27 and a half years. Kind of a silly little thing. Now, let's get back into how to get around the capital gains tax. The capital gains tax is a lot, by the way. It's probably either 15 or 20%, depending on how much money you make. There is a couple ways around it. So the one of the best parts about real estate that doesn't exist with stocks, well, it sort of does, is what's called a 1031 exchange. And a 1031 exchange is where you say, hey, I'm taking this property and I'm going to sell it and I'm going to reinvest the money into more property, another property or more properties. There's rules involved with 1031 exchanges that I don't have time to go into today, but just know that, like, there's timelines involved. You're not allowed to take any of the money, and you have to, your new properties that you buy, property or properties, have to exceed the price of the ones that you sold. But basically, if you do that 1031 exchange, no capital gains tax on whatever your gain was. So you sold the property, you made $300,000 on it. If you do a 1031 exchange, so it's called deferring. Okay, so they're not waiving the capital gains tax. They're just saying, okay, we're going to let you roll that into the next one, and then into the next one, and into the next one. But someday you're going to sell that sucker, and we're going to charge you a gazillion dollars in capital gains tax, unless. Can you guys tell that I just like love this topic so much? Unless you are willing to wait until you die and pass the properties on to your heirs. Now, this gets into some complicated probate and trusts, and you're definitely going to need to go speak to an attorney, an accountant, and make sure that you got this stuff set up right. But the basic concept, and it might be different in different states, but as far as I'm aware, it's pretty much across the country. You can take a property, you can die, pass the properties on to your heirs, and they get a step up in what's called the cost basis to what it was worth at the time that you died. Okay, so you bought a property for $300,000. By the time you died, you did a bunch of 1031 exchanges. You now own 20 properties. Your portfolio is worth $50 million. You die. You pass it on to your heirs. They get a step up to what it was worth at the time you died. Well, guess what? It was worth $50 million at the time that you died. They turn around and sell it. No capital gains tax. Right? Like, amazing. All right. So super, super amazing.
So this is why all the kids are waiting for their parents to die.
I know that's why my kids are waiting for me to die. All right. Now, I know that some of you might be thinking, well, okay, but how do I come up with $60,000, right? I understand, like, to go out and just get $60,000 and go buy an investment property can be difficult. My best piece of advice is to start small, start saving, start putting however much of your income away, not into a retirement account. We want some portion of your money that you'll be able to access at a future date, where you can, it might take you a couple of years, but just start being disciplined, start putting some money away every single month. And as soon as you get to 60,000 or however much you're going to need to be able to buy the investment property that you want, then go out and do that. But there are some easier ways. And one of those we like to refer to in the industry as house hacking, which is where you can buy a property as your primary residence. Now, the best part about buying a property as your primary residence is that you only need as little as 3% down. Heck, if you're a veteran, or if you're willing to buy in rural areas and use a USDA loan or a down payment assistance program, there might even be some cases where you can buy a house with no money down. Okay, so you get into a house with no money down, and then you live there for a year. By the way, I'm not advocating that you commit mortgage fraud. I'm not telling you go buy a primary residence and say that and then rent it. No, buy a real primary residence. live in it for a year, and then turn it into a rental and go buy another one. Live in it for a year or two, buy another one. You know, I wish I could go back to my younger self and do that. You know, now with 8 kids, it's just too hard, but I wish more people would do this. And it looks like Sarah's got a question.
I don't have a question, but before you move out of that residence, get a HELOC on it, because some banks don't, or most banks don't do HELOCs on investment property. So make a HELOC before you move out.
That is excellent advice, Sarah. Yeah, it's extremely difficult. There are some, like, maybe some weird lenders that will do it, but the terms are going to be terrible even if you find someone to do it. A HELOC is, of course, stands for a home equity line of credit. It's sort of like turning your, you can borrow against your home, but not in the form of a mortgage loan. It's sort of like a credit card. I kind of hate saying that though, because it's way better.
A credit line.
Credit line, thank you, where you can borrow against, you have the money available if you need it. Please don't use the money to go on a vacation or to do something that isn't going to give you a return. But yes, once you move out of the house, extremely difficult to nearly impossible to get a HELOC against a non-owner occupied property, which is why in my scenario before I had you selling the properties every 8 years, not just refinancing the properties every 8 years, but also because I want to start the depreciation clock all over again on a property every 8 years. But anyway, yeah, get a HELOC before you move out. You've got that line of credit. Now you've got this extra money available where you can go out and buy more properties. If you found a good deal, you've got money available to use. Transparency, I have a HELOC available. I borrowed nothing against it, but I have a HELOC available on my house so that if I had a deal and I didn't have the money for it, guess what? Now I have the money for it. Like, it would have to be a good deal because I don't want to pay the 7% interest rate on my HELOC. But if I found a house that was a really, really good deal and I wanted to buy it and I needed cash right now, I could get to it. Okay. So I get though right now rates are, you know, so maybe today isn't the right time to pull out a HELOC, but it's something to think about for the future. And then, yeah, so buy a house as a primary residence, turn it into a rental. And then also you can invest inside of an IRA. So if you have enough money inside of a self-directed IRA, you can, your IRA can actually own real estate. There's some complications there. You're not allowed to take any of the cash flow or anything like that. So your IRA owns the real estate. The rent checks are paid back to your IRA. Maintenance fees are paid out of the IRA. Like everything, it's got to be done right. Talk to an accountant, make sure you set it up correctly. The downside to investing in real estate in an IRA, it's very difficult to use a mortgage against it. Me personally, I'm kind of a fan of saying, like, let's do both. Like, let's have an IRA, invest in some stocks and, you know, that kind of stuff. And let's also invest in real estate. I can't decide if I'm a huge fan of owning real estate inside of an IRA, but then again, you're going to get way better returns. I guess it depends on how long you have and what your portfolio looks like. It's worth considering. It's worth looking into. All right. I've had a lot of people kind of ask what I look for. Number one, most important thing before I buy an investment property is it a deal, right? Like, am I getting a property that I feel that I'm able to buy at below fair market value? You know, when the market was insanely hot, I'm sorry, Christy, we bought several new builds. And the reason why we were buying those is because the market was so insane. Again, you saw in 2021, Phoenix prices rose by 21%, but the builders were taking 6 to 8 months to build. So I felt extremely confident I could get this home under contract. Oh, and by the way, one of them that we bought only required $500, or maybe it was $1,000 because it was non-owner, like $1,000 in earnest money. So I was like, worst case scenario, if the market doesn't do what I believe it's going to do, but I'm pretty confident that it's going to do what I believe it's going to do, worst case scenario, I can just lose my $1,000 in earnest money. But so new builds can sometimes work in a very hot market because you lock in the price today, you don't close on it for 8 months, the property is worth way more by that time. You know, in several cases, I bought homes from, you know, people who were only going to sell to, you know, Open Door or OfferPad. And I was able to go in and say, hey, you know what, I'll match that offer and I'll give you that. But it was already a home that was at a great price. So that's the most important thing. You make all good real estate investors know they make their money when they buy, not when they sell. You got to get into it at a good price. If you're just buying something at fair market value, and especially in today's climate where rates are and everything, possibly not the greatest investment. For me, Okay, there's a lot of markets you can invest in that get really, really good cash flow. However, well, I don't even know about that with how high rates are, but historically they've had better cash flow than others. The problem is that they're not growing. For me, I only want to invest in areas where I feel like the population is growing as a whole, because I feel like the population increase is part of what's going to cause the values to go up. More demand, lower supply, you get it from economics. For me, the house itself, I typically prefer 3 to 4 bedroom, 2 bath, 2 car garage, single story. Single story one's important to me because in Phoenix, we have a lot of retired people, a lot of, people who can't do stairs. Also, almost everyone prefers single levels because they're cheaper to air condition and all that stuff. I don't really love HOAs. I do have several properties with HOAs, but it seems like I'm getting weed violation notices and just different things like that. But also I've found it very interesting, and I've done several studies on this, the homes in HOAs, there's another community across the street with no HOA, and yeah, that community is not as nice, it's not as pretty, but what I found is that the rents, at least in my area, they don't vary dramatically, meaning I can rent the home with no HOA for about the same money as I can for the house in the HOA. But I don't have the expense of paying the HOA $80 a month or whatever it is. So the HOA really cuts into the cash flow. I personally really love to invest in houses that are newer. If you end up having to replace the roof or the air conditioner or anything like that within the first couple of years, it's going to really, really demolish your potential cash flow. What to avoid? I don't like to invest in any homes with pools, lots of extra liability and a huge cost to maintain. And I hate investing in homes with solar panels because you're basically paying extra, whether it's a solar loan, solar lease, or even if the solar is free and clear. As the buyer, you're basically paying extra money for that solar panels. And what I found, the homes aren't renting for more. So even though the renter is getting a benefit, they're saving $200 a month on their taxes. I'm sorry, on their rent. They're typically not willing to pay $200 more in. I'm sorry, they're not paying. Restart that whole sentence. They're going to say the renters are going to save $200 a month on their electric bill, but you're not usually going to be able to rent that home for $200 more per month. In fact, if you list it for $200 more per month because it has solar panels, it's going to get less views than a home without solar panel, less online activity, less applications, less interest than a home that's just priced $200 cheaper. Less expensive homes are easier to rent. If it backs up to a busy road or train tracks or major power lines, it's not a deal killer, but just know that someday you're going to have to sell that. So you better be getting an extra good deal on it because it's hard to sell homes that back up to those things. I already mentioned I don't like expensive HOAs, and I don't, listen, super established, highly sought after A+ school district communities are good to invest in, but you're not going to get good cash flow in there because regular owner occupied buyers are willing to pay top dollar to live in that neighborhood. So I'm not saying you need to only invest in am I allowed to say in the ghetto, but I'm not referring to any specific area. I'm not saying you only need to buy trashy rundown area properties, but maybe see if you can find something somewhere in the middle. Yes, Sarah.
I like to call it blue collar towns or blue collar neighborhoods because, for example, I invest in a town that nobody wants to invest in, but because it has a bad reputation, but surrounding it, there's a lot of like hospitals and things like that. So I get like my properties are to nurses, rented to nurses, correctional officers who make good money. So I like to go for the blue collar towns.
Yeah, several of my properties are really close to a lot of prisons, and I actually rent to several probation officers. Love that kind of stuff. All right. Now, one important thing, where to invest. I definitely recommend investing in what we call landlord-friendly states. I found this article that listed Indiana, Georgia, Kentucky, Arizona, Texas, Florida, and Alabama as the most landlord-friendly states. What that basically means is in those states, it's the easiest to evict tenants. The landlords have some of the best rights. But the downside, I don't love Texas and Florida because yes, they're landlord friendly, but they have very high property taxes. So that's something to consider as well. High property taxes are going to make it a little harder to cash flow. And I'm really sorry to my California agents, but not California no matter what. California is probably the most tenant friendly state that I'm aware of. So, I mean, it is complicated. Don't invest in California unless you for sure know what you're doing. Honestly, if like I had a long lost relative who just died and handed me a property in California, I would be looking to sell it right away and reinvest the money in another market. And I don't want to get in, I'm out of time. I don't want to get into the weeds about some of the complications of investing in real estate, but I do see some chuckling going on from some of my California agents in here. So, cash flow is important. I try to only invest in deals with cash flow, but yes, that is true, Yannicka. The good side to investing in California is you get really great appreciation. But I would kind of argue again, when, in 2021, Phoenix, 21% appreciation or 22%. I think that was higher than most parts of California. So I think there's markets where you can get the really great appreciation and also be landlord friendly. Cash flow is really important, but the honest truth is that right now with where rates are, you're going to be very hard pressed to find anything that cash flows, at least as a traditional rental. Maybe if you did like a rent by the room to travel nurses or an Airbnb, you could possibly break even or create some cash flow. But even if you went back to that spreadsheet that I created, I had you losing money on every property for the first couple of years. It's still a good investment. Where you make all your money in real estate is in long-term appreciation, in the values of the property rising. But also you have to remember, rents go up by 8% per year. Unless you're in California, then you can only raise it by 5% plus inflation. But rents are going up at 8.86% per year. So even if you're losing $100, $200 a month on it right now, it will get better. You will have positive cash flow in a couple of years. But more importantly, what you have to remember is you're actually paying the balance of your loan down every month. So your cash flow is negative $200 or $300 or $400 a month or whatever it is, but you're actually paying your loan balance down by $400 or $500 a month. So you're actually not losing money on that. And then when you add in the tax benefits, the amount of money you're going to save on your taxes, even if your cash flow is negative, you're still actually making money on that property. Does that make sense? All right, so how to get started. I do recommend, I know some of you were probably invited here by another agent, possibly on my team. So if that is the case, speak to the agent who invited you here. If you want to learn more about investing, I'm happy to speak with you about it. Definitely have an emergency fund. I don't recommend spending your last dollar on an investment property. And also if you're buying it as an investment, if you're buying your primary residence, this isn't quite as true, but if you're buying an investment property, you usually have to show to the bank that you qualify for the loan, but you also have reserves. You have to have some extra money set aside to where if it takes a minute to find the renter, or if you end up needing to have to replace the air conditioner, you're going to need a little bit of money to pay for those types of things. I don't recommend investing in real estate if you're in credit card debt. So if you have credit card debt, I don't have time to talk about it, but check out Dave Ramsey's Debt Snowball and work on that first. If you don't own your own home, do that first. Quit worrying about investing in real estate and just buy your own house. But quit trying to buy the house that is the perfect Instagram-worthy white kitchen, granite countertop, stainless steel appliances. Buy an ugly house that is in an area that is going to make a great rental. And just live in it for a year, turn it into a rental, and then go buy another one. Then turn that one into a rental, go buy another one. Then by the time you own like 6 or 7, then you can go buy your Instagram house. Okay? Pinky swear. All right. Anyway, that's about it. So we're out of time. I apologize. I tried really hard to end on time, but does anybody have any questions for me? If you need to go, you can go, but I'm going to stay here for a few minutes just to see if anybody had any questions or comments or concerns. I think I hopefully answered all the questions in the chat. Scrolling through here to make sure I didn't miss anything. All right, well, I guess that is it. So I really, really appreciate you guys coming. And if you do have any questions, please feel free to message me, and have a great day, everybody.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.